Hmm. Short prayer to the creator that I believe in to help guide me through this message that I have prepared for you all today. Welcome back to the Expression of Love podcast. It is your host, Soul Expression Indeed. I am wearing my Become Your Own Breakthrough shirt because today I am probably going to break through some of the fears that I have around sharing what I really believe. Well, in short, today I'm here to talk to you about my beliefs when it comes to abortion, because it's such a significant and complex conversation that it definitely, at least in my view, touches the core of who you are as a person. And I think who you are at your core matters. If a part of the goal, a part of the collective goal of human beings is to create societies that are morally sound and generally peaceful and fun and cooperative, as well as excellent. So, from the perspective of what I want to share being tied to who I am at this moment in time, of course, who I am may and probably should change at some point down the line. But where I am right now at 30 years old, these are my thoughts on the abortion conversation. And I call it a conversation multiple times in my written piece. And I do that because it should remain civil. So feel free to argue with me or support me in the comments of this video and try to keep it civil for a bunch of very obvious reasons. With that being said, let's dive in, shall we?
Expressions of love,
Firstly, I want to acknowledge that statistics are not everything. There are many complications that must be taken into account when discussing human beings and human behavior, and the wide array of functions of the human mind. That said, statistics do allow us to avoid conversations that have absolutely no room for common ground and or cross-perspective understanding. For example, we cannot conclude that just because X number of homicides happen in X region of the city, that means that people living there are murderous in their hearts, no matter what their background is or their criminal history. But we can come to an agreement about that region that says, if you are living in X region, you are X likely to encounter homicidal people. So keep your eyes open and learn how to protect yourself. And we can say, if you are living in X region, you are X likely to become a part of that statistic. You're X likely to run into, and a different number X likely to be one yourself. Those things can be generally understood by looking at statistics. But we cannot say that because X number of homicides happen in X region of the country or your city, that automatically means that people living there are murderous in their heart. We cannot say that. So I know that statistics are not everything. And I want to start this off by acknowledging statistics are not the whole conversation. They help us make sense of the conversation, and they help us objectively view the results of the human behavior in question and make for a better environment, mental environment, emotional environment, for us to come to a sound conclusion of what to do moving forward. With that said, I grew up into my adulthood as a pro-choice person. I even held the hand of a good friend of mine after she went through her own abortion and comforted her as best I could as she processed what just happened with her mother also present. I didn't develop any really strong opinions on the issue at all until 2022, when the issue was made into really a societal craze with the leak of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. That's when I had a couple conversations that made me curious enough to look into the subject of abortion, to look into the history of abortion, and to look into the ramifications and results of abortion, both in this country and a little bit worldwide, although my beliefs and my perspective is largely based on the country that I live in. So here are some things that I have found out. Six percent of the population in America is Black women, right? Which is, if Black people make up about 12 to 13%, then 6 to 7% of the population of America would be Black women. 40% of abortions in America are also Black women. Now, that is a huge differential, if you will. 6% of the population gets 40% of the population's abortions. Why is that? Well, if you know anything about the history of Planned Parenthood and the rise of abortion clinics, you know that eugenics, the idea of perfecting the human genome and only producing the correct children, which for eugenists of that time looked like an Aryan, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, strong white person. And these eugenicists planned and strategically placed Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics and things into neighborhoods that they wanted to decrease the population of, in their pursuit of their eugenics ideals. Another thing that I found out, 60% of women who get abortions are single mothers. 60% of women, so not Black women this time, 60% of the women who get abortions are already mothers, are people that already have children. 40% of women who get abortions have already gotten 2 or more abortions. So an argument that is often made due to this statistic, 40% of abortions are given to women that have already gotten 2 or more abortions, is that abortion is being used as a form of birth control. Abortion is being used as a form of contraception. It's being used as a way to avoid the consequence of having sexual relations with someone who either you don't want to have a child with, or they don't want to have a child with you, and you don't want to be burdened, you could say, with raising the child on your own. So many abortions, 40% of them happen in the case of a mother who already has, in the case of a woman who already had 2 or more abortions. Now, some of the more contentious statistics of the matter. Rape accounts for about 1% of abortions, and incest accounts for about 0.5%, so about half of the accounts of rape. So rape and incest are between 0.5 and 1% of all abortions. We know this because they are surveyed and they are asked at the clinics, as well as various studies have been done to, and they all come up with very similar numbers as far as I've been able to research myself. If you have other information, feel free to leave it in the comments. Now, with these statistics in mind, there's something striking about the first one. 6% of the population in America is Black women, 40% of abortions is Black women. That has made it possible for this statistic to even be here. 18 million Black babies have been killed via abortion since 1973. People who were born in 1973 are still very much alive and well, most of them. 18 million Black babies aborted since 73. That's a lot. And the number continues to grow. I haven't looked at every single cause of death in my research, but I would be pretty surprised if anything else was anywhere near these numbers. 18 million from 73 to 2022. And I think it was a little earlier. This statistic might have been from like 2019 or something like that. But 18 million babies between 1973 and today. Now, because of this and other reasons, the Black population growth has stagnated. We're not growing the Black population. We remain between 12 and 13% of the US population. Not because we're not having sexual relations, but because the resulting children are being killed in record numbers. And they are being killed. They are alive and they are being killed. You cannot kill something that's not alive. But if you are a being and you have cells, or at least a single cell, and you are moving and growing and reacting to your environment, you are alive. You don't need much to be considered alive, right? An amoeba is alive. Single-celled bacteria are alive. They are alive. They make decisions, they eat, they create offspring, whatever. You are alive as a fetus. And when you get when an abortion happens, you die. So, something related, but on the side of this issue, is fatherlessness. Fatherlessness, and really the breakdown of the Black family unit, is probably the biggest problem that we face. When there is a strong connection between a potential mother and a potential father, and that connection is backed by not only maybe the institute of marriage, but also it's a relationship that's respected by your family, your respective families and neighbors and communities, and you have support and things like that. Emotional, even if it's not financial support, you have emotional support behind your relationship, and then you have a child, right? Especially if it's a marriage. But and if you have a child after your relationship hits a certain level of strength and support, then likely the child will not be aborted. It may be miscarried. It may die, but likely the likelihood of the child being killed, or other things like joining a gang or being, completely socially, misbehaving socially on a large scale, that chance goes way, 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 way down when the child is a result of a marriage or at least a strong relationship. So in the 1960s, before the LBJ, right, Lyndon Baines Johnson, former President LBJ's plan called the Great Societies Act was implemented, there was a 23% single mother rate in the Black community, and that number was considered very high at the time. Before the Great Societies Act was implemented, there was a 23% single mother rate in the Black community, and that is pretty high. I mean, that's 23%. That's over 1/5, right? If 20% is 1/5, that means slightly more than 1 out of every 5 Black children was born into a single mother home. Side note, that doesn't mean that the father was completely absent in all of these cases, because there are varying degrees to which a father is involved in the child's life. Sometimes there's a lot of economic support, or sometimes there are periods when the father is there, and then periods where the father's not, and then he comes back, and then he disappears again. There are varying degrees to which fathers are in the life of the child in a quote unquote single mother home. But back to the point, in the 60s, before the Great Societies Act was implemented, there was a 23% single mother rate in the Black community. A few years ago, it was 74%. A few years ago means around 2018, I believe. It was 74%. This is tragic. And I'm not going to get into why I think what I think the reasons are, because that's its own video. So I have to look further into why the number is so high. But in terms of the census data, the number is what it is. It's in the 70s, and right now, I believe in 2022, it's in the high 70s of fatherlessness, which is tragic. But fatherlessness is still secondary to abortion when talking about the death rate of Black bodies. Now, when a woman is raped, and abortion is seen as the answer, are we sending the message that the innocent child deserves the death penalty for the actions of the rapist? Rape is wrong. It is wrong to rape. I totally and completely condemn rapists and sexual, assaulters and all of that. I do not approve of their actions. I think we should give rapists, at least repeat rapists, the death penalty in this country. It's my opinion. I do not support or condone or think anything positive about rape. But we don't even give the death penalty to rapists in the US. Why are we giving the death penalty to the innocent child, objectively innocent child, for the actions of the rapist. It is not a right to kill people, whether they are inside or outside of the womb. It is a made-up notion that it is somehow a God-given right or a constitutional right or a right of any kind for these babies to be killed. That it's the woman's right to kill the baby, or that it's the doctor who's performing the abortion's right to kill the baby. It is not a right. It's a made-up notion that this is somehow a right. Killing babies. Killing people, period. Now, obviously, some people get extremely desperate and go to self-harmful lengths to abort a baby that they decide not to carry to term. And so one of the arguments for abortion is that it prevents women from going to these extreme lengths and getting what's popularly called back alley abortions. But I wonder about that. I wonder about if the norm, or if what we taught children is that life begins when it actually begins at conception, which this is not only a scientific fact, this is a basic fact. Conception means life began. That's what conception means. That bling, life. That's what conception means and points to. So that's where life begins. That is not a contentious point, and I'm not trying to argue something arbitrary when I say that. That's what it means, that a new life is now here and forming itself into a human, baby or whatever, human fetus, whatever you call it inside the womb. If you still call it a fetus at 9 months, 3 seconds before it's born, then sure, fetus. But either way, this conception now means new life is here. Now, my good people, I don't want you to think that I'm being intellectually irresponsible. So I want to also provide something that I've come across that is in disagreement from a particular professor of biology that is of the thought that actually there isn't consensus amongst biologists, which is particularly fine. This is what Howard A. Snyderman, professor of biology, says. He's a professor at Swarthmore College. He says that as many as 5 development stages that from a biological perspective are all plausible. There are as many as 5 development stages that are all plausible for the beginning points of human life. First of these stages is fertilization or conception, when the egg duct combines with the sperm to form what's called zygote, or basically the single celled I would say human, but the single celled form of human that has the full genetic code of who it will grow up to be, or of who it is for the entire life. That genetic code, or that coding, period, is the first stage. And he says the second plausible stage is about 2 weeks after fertilization, when the embryo loses the ability to form identical twins. So basically, you are indefinitely an individual if you haven't started forming into twins or triplets or something at this point. Then you're, biologically speaking, an individual Although that doesn't really make sense to me for when you become an individual. If you were already an individual, they just didn't know it was going to be for sure. They didn't know if it was going to split into two for sure until that mark. So you are already an individual, but according to this doctor, they say that's when you're quote unquote a biological individual. Do you see the inconsistency, I guess? And I'm not trying to discredit this man's work or life. I don't know him, but this is what's confusing to me is the process of growth. Like twins, just because you didn't expect them, are still just as valuable, just as a beautiful of a thing as individual people. The triplets, these when these things happen, it's still just as much of the miracle of life as when what usually happens. It doesn't change. It doesn't dehumanize you if you were born with a twin, or if you were supposed to be born with a twin, but the twin died in the womb, or any of these different things that could happen if instead of forming an individual, the coding forms two individuals, because those two individuals, twins, they're still different people, right? Your identical twin is not yourself. It's two souls, if you will. And I'm using the word soul for simplicity because I don't know a perfectly universal word. Anyway, the third possible stage, according to Dr. Dr. Schneiderman, excuse me, is between 24 and 27 weeks of pregnancy. And this is already getting into weird territory for me. Between 24 and 27 weeks. So 24th week, 25th week, 26th week, and 27th. That's a month of difference. How many intricate anyway, this third stage, 24 to 27 weeks of pregnancy, when the characteristic human-specific brainwave pattern emerges in the fetus's brain between either the 24th or the 25th or the 26th or the 27th week since fertilization. The fourth possible stage is called viability, when the fetus typically becomes viable outside the uterus with the help of available medical technology. And it says here this stage is reached at about 24 weeks. And we also know that there was a baby born in Alabama at 21 weeks and they survived. So viability, again, it's a 5-week difference depending on the individual. Excuse me, I'm sorry. 4-week difference. 21st week, 22nd week, 23rd week, or 24th week is when you become viable. And then the final possibility is birth itself, which means, according to this biologist, that 9 months and 5 seconds before you are born, you are still not a life. You are still not human life. The difference between human life could be, in his work, that your life begins. I'm gonna guess when you take your first breath, which to me is just very silly territory in the whole conversation. So I just wanted to provide some context and some thought, some immediate, I guess, reaction thoughts that I had in reading it. I just read it recently, so the counterpoints that I made were not written down. Please excuse their relative sloppiness. And back to your regularly scheduled program. I wonder that if what was taught to most people, and if the general understanding in most people's eyes and minds and hearts was that life, for one, life is precious and a gift and not just some torturous thing that we have to go through until we die, but also that it begins at conception and is precious at conception. If so many women would go to extreme lengths to get back alley abortions. We do know, statistically speaking, that making abortion illegal does decrease the abortion rate. Also, according to the Charlotte Lazaire Institute, and a bunch of other ways of looking at data, making abortions illegal does decrease the rate of killed children, unborn children. And on top of that, to further my point, death of the mother happens with legal abortion too. There was recently a woman in a Chicago who went to Planned Parenthood in Chicago who died after a legal and quote unquote safe abortion was performed. Now, in defense of clinical abortion, I'll add that her emergency care was delayed after the clinic did not perform the procedure correctly, meaning Planned Parenthood basically is responsible for her death. Yet the fact remains, deaths result from both clinical abortions and what's popularly called back alley abortions, because abortion is always a violent act for the mother and, of course, for the killed child. And to further the point, and to not accidentally contradict myself, I'll add this. These types of mistakes happen often at abortion clinics, and hospital physicians are more likely to be given no information about the patient's condition when their help is needed. Emergency room physician Dr. James C. Anderson, MD, said that in his 30 years of experience, abortion clinics never informed him about their patients' conditions. I quote, "I have always had to evaluate the situation, come to my own conclusions, and initiate what I thought was appropriate treatment. This definitely created some delays that were not in the patient's best interests," Anderson said. These delays can have life-threatening implications when dealing with hemorrhage or infection. So, as you can see, it is not unheard of for clinical abortion or safe abortion to result in life-threatening situations for the mother. Now, I have some more questions. The first of which is, by advocating for the pro-choice argument, are we sending the message that we should make it convenient to kill children? Like saying, let's deal with your family issues, let's deal with your financial issues, let's deal with what you fear is coming in your future by killing one of your children and making it convenient for you to do so. Are we sending that message? And if we are we willing to send that message? Meaning, would you be willing to stand on a stage in front of a lot of people and say, this is what you believe in? Now, I know some of you obviously are willing to do so. And I do think there may be something mentally wrong with being okay with that, at least on its surface, because it's very disconnected from the fact that you started off as a single cell, a single celled, newly fertilized egg, one cell, right? Everything else is essentially killed by the like immune system and just the process of fertilization. The only thing that gets in is the coding, the DNA, whatever, and then the, I guess, the essential process of how you came into this world begins right then at that at conception, at that point. That is where essentially the growth process starts. And I know, because I've encountered and even had a few arguments with people, with people that view the fertilized egg as just an egg. They say there's no difference from this egg and the egg of, like, the eggs in the refrigerator, or a single egg in the refrigerator. But the egg in the refrigerator will never turn into a human being. The egg in the refrigerator had, basically started the growing process towards becoming a chicken. It did not start the growing process toward becoming an adult human. The fertilized egg in the human womb, when fertilized by human sperm, starts the growing process toward becoming an adult human. All children are growing into adult humans. So whether the child is in the womb, whether the child physically looks like a human or not, what it is doing is growing into a fully functioning, growing into an adult human. Obviously there's defects and there's things, but the majority of the time, when you conceive a baby, when you conceive, when conception happens, what has taken place is the growth process towards adult human, or if it's twins, towards two adult humans, whatever, has started. That has started. So even those that say, well, it's just a parasite until all of its organs are formed and stuff like that, whatever you call it, the fact remains that it will only become a human, a real like a tapeworm that feeds off of your nutrients at your expense, is not turning into a human, is not growing towards adult human, and will stay in your body until you die or until you kill it with, herbs or some sort of medical way of killing it or whatever. It will stay there. But a baby, or at the moment of conception, the fertilized egg starts the growing process to not only be birthed at some point, but also grow into an adult human being. That's not true of any true parasite, right? No matter how analogous to parasitic activity of a growing fetus is, or a baby is inside the womb. And I'm okay with the word fetus and the word baby. I'm okay with either one, because it's not like it's a chimpanzee fetus or a pig fetus or an amphibian fetus. You know what I'm saying? It's going to grow into a human. There has never been a case that I've ever been exposed to of human sperm fertilizing a human egg, and what is birthed is a baby cow. It has never happened to my current knowledge. Comment below if you've ever experienced or seen anything different. But what is growing is a human life. It's not a true parasite like a tapeworm or something like that basically stays until it dies. Now, what I think is wrong about the notion that the fetus is not worthy of being called a child until it looks human is, I think it's disconnected from the fact that you didn't always look human, but you always were human. And so that's what I fundamentally think is wrong with that argument. Just wanted to provide some clarification. Back to your regularly scheduled programming. Another question I have that really I've just been pondering since I've started looking into this issue more and more is, does the abortion actually help anything? Does it help something? What if we focus on solving the problems of the mother rather than solving the problem of how to most conveniently kill the baby? Right? Why don't we move the conversation away from talking solely about the mother and the mother's problems into a conversation that includes both the mother and the child? Make no mistake, good people, I am not trying to convince you that what I believe is the only way that you should think, or that what I believe should be what we need to base the law of the land on, or anything like that. I am simply trying to converse with you from the point of view that I hold at this time and explain why I think what I think, as well as ask questions to you that you can answer in the comments. Again, when you do, please remain civil. But I know, okay, I know people who will argue to their death that before birth or before a certain stage, some people differ on that point, but before birth or before a certain stage of gestation or growth, right, which they can never define that stage with certainty ever. They've never, in any of the civil conversations or arguments that I've had about this topic, those that say this can never define exactly what they mean by a certain stage or exactly what stage it switches. But they argue that before birth or before a certain stage, the only proper word to describe the unborn child is the word parasite. I know y'all exist. I know some of you are probably watching or watching clips from this and typing very angry things maybe in the comments. They can be angry, just try to keep it civil. You can be civil and angry at the same time. I believe in you. And, more on the parasite argument later in this video. But when I'm talking with these people about how, in my view, how illogical that is when it's challenged, they all, in short time, reveal how it's just a purely emotional argument, either when they come spontaneously irate or when they say that they can no longer talk about this or they no longer want to talk to me at all because of the emotional reaction that they're having. And whether you believe that that's because I am being mean to these people or being unreasonably antagonistic or something along those lines to these people, I'll leave that to you. If you know me, hopefully you know that I don't engage people like that. And if you don't know me, well, your prediction is however you think. You can use this video as an example. This is generally how I talk to people about these things. I have my views. My views are grounded in lots of contemplation, and I talk just like I'm talking now. You can believe that or not. Either way, sorry for going on a tangent there. What I'm trying to say is the basic fact of the matter, in my eyes. Feel free to comment if you have a differing or supportive viewpoint. The basic fact is once you conceive a human life, there are two autonomous people or two autonomous human lives temporarily existing in one body until birth. Just like when any other mammal conceives a life or conceives, because sometimes it's many life, like dogs, for instance, they have a bunch, right? They have a litter, right? Or cats or whatever. So anyway, when any other mammal conceives, from that point until birth, there is more than one autonomous life in a single body, because unlike plant life, which their womb, you could say, is earth or soil and water and time and fertilizer for some of them, right? Pollen, however they get fertilized. So unlike plant life that needs that their womb-like environment is in the ground, our womb-like environment where we start out is in the mother. But it doesn't make us any less of us. There are two basic facts about life forms. And those two basic facts are that life forms eat and they react to their environment in some way, shape, or form. That starts at the moment of conception. The human egg does not start to react to its environment or eat in the way that it does after conception without fertilization. The human sperm doesn't do it either. You, right now, listening and watching this episode, you were not anything other than yourself as a single cell just beginning your growth process. No matter what that growth process looked like, you started out the same way, and you were not something other than yourself. Or at least to me, it would be illogical to claim that you were something else and then you suddenly turned into you. And you're still growing in many ways. Just because you started off in a form that you can't imagine as being human, the fact remains you began in that same way. That's my stance. Feel free to tell me yours. Now, many people say that you cannot compare a newborn to a fetus. But what exactly is the difference? Seriously, I want to have this conversation. What exactly is the difference between an unborn child and a born child? Is it just the location? Meaning in the womb, because it's in the womb, that makes it incomparable to a newborn? What about, again, 9 months, 5 seconds before it's born? What's the difference? A few inches of the birth canal? I don't think so. I mean, you aren't born an adult. So even after you're born, you grow you're still growing, right? You aren't born being able to do anything without your parents or guardians doing it for you and with you for at least a year or two. And many things, until about maybe 15, 16, when you have more of a grasp of reality. And on top of those two facts, you're going to die anyway, one day, hopefully after a fulfilling life. But maybe the argument is about the probability of the survival of the unborn child without the mother, either the viability argument that the unborn child isn't viable and that's why it's connected to the mother and fed through the umbilical cord and stuff like that, or the more dark side of that same argument, the parasite argument, that it's a parasitic entity existing within the body, and then when it's born, now it's not a parasite anymore, so now that's the difference. Then, to me, the answer to both of those arguments is the fact that the newborn baby and the fetus would both die without the mother, feeding them, keeping them warm, holding them, teaching them. Neither one would survive without the mother. And again, all the way up to at least about maybe 6 or 7 years old, when you can, learn to do certain things like cook, and you can wash yourself, you can dress yourself, you can scream and run away from strangers. Things of that nature come into play probably, I guess, around maybe 5 through 7, but 5 still, very, very unlikely that you can just survive without adults. So the viability argument, I don't think it really holds water when you really put it under some scrutiny, because a newborn is no more likely to survive without the mother or without being taken care of than the fetus is. So I don't really see a huge difference between the unborn child and the child. Both are growing. Both are not able to make it without the mother, completely reliant, right? Entities completely in need of the mother's help, and both are alive. And that part is inarguable. Both are alive. Another point that is significant here is that depression, addiction, anger, and suicide rates tend to spike for women after abortions. There are exceptions to every generalization, but often this is the case, according to Lila Rose, who does a lot of work in this field of study, if you will. She is pro-life, so if you automatically hate all pro-life arguments, then Lila Rose is likely not a name that you want to hear right now. But according to her, and she does more research in this area than I do, depression, addiction, anger, and suicide rates tend to spike for women after abortions. So there are negative effects on the mind and heart of these mothers that go through this process. Really, there's a change in anybody who kills anybody else, even in self-defense. There's something that happens in the mind and in the heart when you kill somebody, or when you are responsible for the death of somebody. And that doesn't mean that we should look at things like when you are pregnant and you didn't want to get pregnant, but you did the action that could make you pregnant, that it's your punishment to carry the child to term. Because I don't think that's the way to go about thinking about this at all. I would never argue that you should carry, you should have a baby and raise the child until they're at least 18 because you're punished for your actions. I would never argue that, directly or indirectly, with intention, ever. But there may be negative mental and emotional effects that are self-inflicted by the choice to kill this unborn child. Another popular comparison people make is between abortion and miscarriage. But there is a clear double standard for how unborn life is viewed in these two situations. For women who experience a miscarriage, people often say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. I'm so sorry that this happened to your baby, your little angel baby. You have an angel baby in your family now. Grieve, please grieve as long and as hard as you need to get through this tragic, this tragedy." And that's usually how, that's how I talked to my older sister who recently had a miscarriage, and that's how we are taught to look at the death of an unborn child when it happens via miscarriage, especially when it's a wanted child, but really either way, meaning a wanted pregnancy, especially when it's a wanted pregnancy, but really either way. But when the mother gets an abortion, there's a bit of gaslighting that takes place that can sound like this. "Oh, there's no baby to grieve. It wasn't really a child. You are empowered because you did this. This is an empowering thing that you did. It's your choice and your body." Which is the literal definition of dehumanization of that unborn child. So I don't agree with the pro-abortion or pro-choice side of the argument. In terms of what I would do if I ruled the world, or if I was the president or something like that, I'm not, first of all, I'm not in that position, so it's hard for me to conceptualize exactly what I would do, but I'm going to answer that question because I think when people talk about this, they should have enough integrity to at least entertain the thought, well, what would you do about it? So I would not place a federal ban on all abortion across all of the states. I would probably limit the amount of abortion clinics to, per city and per township, maybe per county. Please excuse me, I'm thinking of this on the fly. This is not written down. But I would probably do that where there's a limited number of abortion clinics available. And then what I would make illegal is for a mother to come in and, well, by come in, I mean make a call and make an appointment, and there be absolutely no checking into, why do you feel that this is the best option and things like that. And I would do my best through policies and the way that I talk to the American public to instill the values that I have in my heart, which include strengthening the family unit across races, just strengthening the family at all. Being in a strong and supported relationship before having sexual relations, not by force, but by just normalizing talking about that, because I think sexual relations are also very sacred and should probably happen between two people who love each other very much, not just two people who are very lustful and attracted to each other very much only. And yeah, I would not condone. Now, let me clarify here what I mean by condone, because I just don't want you all to take it out of context and think that I mean in some sort of totalitarian way of governing. What I mean actually by condone right here is, or by the statement I would not condone, is that I would not encourage. I would not come off in a way that suggests that what I believe in is that we should talk about abortion in some ways, or that we should be okay with viewing the miracle of conception in certain ways. What I don't mean is that I would have law enforcement, monitoring phone lines and or forcing people to only speak or write texts and emails about babies and abortion and conception or whatever in the way that I approve. I do not mean that. All I mean is that I would not encourage the perpetuation of the idea that life is trivial, or that the right to live of the unborn child does not have as much weight as the right to, make decisions for the mother. Because I fundamentally and spiritually and pretty much in all ways, I just disagree with the notion that because the baby is starting the growth process toward an adult within the womb or within the body of the mother, that it's only the mother's body. I disagree with that fundamentally. And the 95% of biologists that in a survey agreed that life begins at conception, also I would infer that they don't subscribe to that notion either, that until birth the only body that counts is the mother's body, or until you have all of your organs and toes and fingers and feet, like, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months or something, that it's only the mother's body up until that point, and then suddenly, arbitrarily, it switches to being two bodies when there's no concrete way to put it. So that's what I mean by saying I won't condone something. I don't mean that it's some sort of totalitarianism. All right, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Again, if I was, president, or if I ruled the world or whatever, I would not condone talking about abortion outside of the moral points that I made today, which include viewing the unborn child as an unborn child, meaning a human life, viewing the moment of conception with holiness and gratitude to, again, the creator that I believe in, because there is a way to talk about something and to view something personally without forcing it, or forcing your beliefs on everybody else. And that's what I would aim to do. And I would make it harder in ways that it's hard to conceptualize off the top of my head, to use abortion as a form of contraception and as a form of birth control, and to make it just a convenient way to avoid the consequence of actions, especially if they were consensual actions. And again, when it comes to rape and incest, we're talking between 0.5% and 1% of abortions that happen. Lastly, I want to say what I believe as a general background of this conversation. Women's rights are human rights. This is a fact. Women are human. Just like men's rights or Black people's rights or anything like that. But why don't we include an unborn woman or man into that consideration? The right to live is the most basic, inalienable right that we have as human beings. Again, life is precious. So shouldn't women's rights include unborn women? Shouldn't humans' rights include unborn humans? Thank you for watching. Please comment anything that you feel you need to comment. Please try to remain civil. And please provide any links that you find relevant to support or argue against some of the points that I made in this video. And lastly, please see what I'm doing here as a conversation and nothing more and nothing less. There is a reason why people on both sides of the political spectrum say things like conversations are important. And that's what I'm attempting to do here, is converse with my audience, with you all, about a very sophisticated and complicated and involved issue from my moral viewpoint, and including some of the statistics and things that I've learned looking into this issue over the last 8 or so months. Much love. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you have not already had the chance. And I look forward to talking with you in the comments.
Expressions of love.